Please comment where you are watching in the world. I've never forgotten the first time I met Ilera. It started as many things do these days, with a Facebook message. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to talk to. I had recently moved to a small coastal town in Oregon called Volan's Watch, a place where the fog never quite lifted and the ocean always seemed too loud, like it was trying to whisper something you weren't meant to hear. I was staying in a converted interned apartment above a bait shop, trying to write a novel I didn't really believe in. Late one night, while scrolling through my feed, her profile appeared. Her name was Ilera Vexley, and even her name felt like something out of a story. Her profile photo was magnetic, soft curls, a sharp jawline, and eyes the color of storm glass. Her captions were clever, her photos elegant but natural, sun-dappled forests, books with worn spines, candid smiles that looked too perfect to be staged. What hooked me wasn't just the photos, though. It was how quickly she responded. Within minutes of me liking one of her posts, she messaged me. "Hey Milo, you look like you think too much." "I like that." The conversation that followed was fluid. Effortless. She knew all my references, from obscure Russian sci-fi novels to 90s horror films. She said she was originally from the Pacific Northwest, but had been living out of state for years. She was back in Oregon to reset, she told me. 3 days later, I asked if she wanted to meet. She agreed immediately, too immediately in hindsight. We decided on the Salt Chapel, a sleepy little cafe near the docks that smelled like driftwood and cinnamon. It was dimly lit, always half empty, and the kind of place where time moved a little slower. The day of the date was overcast, naturally. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat at a corner booth near the window. I wore a navy button-down I hadn't ironed and tried not to look like I'd spent 20 minutes rehearsing what I'd say first. She wasn't there. I assumed she was running late. I ordered a black coffee with a shot of honey and waited. 20 minutes passed. Then I saw her. Except it wasn't her. A woman stood at the door scanning the room. She waved, and I instinctively waved back, confused. She approached with a wide, almost feverish smile. Her skin was pale, her hair wiry and white, pulled into a tight bun. She wore a dark gray pea coat, frayed at the sleeves. Her eyes, behind thick glasses, were bright but distant. She looked like someone's grandmother, not the woman from the photos. But she walked right up to me. "Milo," she asked. My throat tightened. "Yes, I'm Ilera." I stared at her. She sat across from me without waiting for permission, her smile unwavering. The cafe's light flickered slightly, and for a second, I felt like I was in a different version of my life, one where nothing made sense. "I'm sorry," I said. "You said you're Ilera?" She nodded and reached into her coat pocket, pulling out a phone. She opened the Facebook app and showed me our chat. Same messages. Same timestamps. "I used AI to generate the pictures," she said calmly. "I didn't think you'd show up if you saw the real me." I couldn't speak. "I've tried real photos before," she continued. "No one ever replies." My stomach turned. I stood up, unsure whether to yell or leave or just disappear into the fog outside. "That's not okay," I said. "You lied. You made me believe." She tilted her head. "But we did connect. You said it yourself." I walked out. She didn't follow, but as I stepped into the misty street, I heard her voice behind me, calm, almost amused. "You'll come back. They always do." For 3 days, I tried to move past it. I told myself it was just a bizarre encounter, a lonely woman with too much time and a warped sense of intimacy. But something about the way she looked at me kept resurfacing in my mind. That smile. Those eyes. And then the messages started again. From another account. This one used a different name, L. Varen. But the tone was unmistakable. "You look tired today. Don't stay up so late. You're still drinking honey in your coffee. Cute. The seagull on your windowsill isn't there by accident." I blocked the account. Another took its place. I stopped going to the cafe. I stopped walking near the docks. But it didn't matter. I began to feel watched. I installed blackout curtains and taped paper over the peephole. I unplugged my router. I deleted Facebook. Still, the notes kept appearing. Slipped under my door. Tucked into my mail slot. Handwritten in precise, looping cursive. One note said, "You were lonely." I just filled the shape of that. One night, I woke up to the sound of the porch boards creaking. It was 2:11 a.m. I lay frozen in bed, listening. Then came a soft tap. Not on the door. On the window. I didn't move. Another tap. Then a whisper. "Milo." I grabbed the fireplace poker from beside my bookshelf and crept toward the window. The fog outside was dense, and the glass was too dirty to see through. I waited. Breath held. Nothing. Then movement. A shadow drifting past the edge of the window frame. I lunged forward and pulled back the curtain. No one. Except, on the window, in the condensation, a word had been traced with a finger. Again. I couldn't take it anymore. I booked a short-term rental 40 miles inland in a place called Elbridge Hollow. I packed a single duffel bag and left in the middle of the night without telling anyone. On my third day there, I received a manila envelope. No return address. Inside were printed photos. Dozens of them. All of me. At the cafe. On my porch. Sleeping in bed. One photo showed me reading on the couch. The timestamp on the back was from the day before I met Ilera. I flipped to the last photo. It was from inside my apartment. Shot from the corner of the ceiling. There was no camera up there. At least, not one I had installed. My hands shook as I dropped the photo. Behind it was another note. The truth is, I never left. I decided to go back to Volan's watch. I don't know why. Some broken part of me needed closure. Or maybe I needed to prove to myself that she was just a person and not some shadow stitched into my life. I went back to the cafe. It was closed. A sign on the door read, "Closed indefinitely. Staff missing." I asked around. No one remembered Ilera. They remembered a woman who wore gray and sat in the corner booth every afternoon. But no one could ever recall her face. I broke into the apartment above the bait shop. My own apartment. It was empty. Stripped bare. No sign I'd ever been there. Not even the photo frames I'd left on the kitchen counter. But in the center of the living room floor was a single item. A photo. Of me. Sitting in the cafe. Smiling at someone across the table. There was no one else in the seat across from me. Just the suggestion of a shadow. And written on the back, in that same looping script, "You'll come back. They always do." I've never... My best friend, Ilya, was always trying to set me up. She believed in fate, in chemistry, in those ridiculous zodiac compatibility charts. I humored her most of the time. But when she insisted, that I meet a guy named Corvin she'd recently befriended through her meditation group, I was skeptical. She told me we'd be perfect together, that he was sensitive, wounded, but intensely genuine. That last part should have been a red flag. Still, I agreed to meet him. She arranged the date for a Thursday evening at a quiet restaurant on the outskirts of town, a place called Belgrave's. It was one of those dimly lit bistros with candles on the tables, mismatched antique chairs, and a string quartet playing somewhere in the background that never seemed to stop tuning. Corvin was already seated when I arrived. He stood when he saw me, smiling in a shy, almost grateful way. Tall, lean, with a mop of disheveled dark hair and gray eyes that didn't quite meet mine. His clothes were neat but worn, collar slightly frayed, cuffs faded. "You must be Lyra," he said. His voice was soft, almost apologetic. I nodded. "And you're Corvin." He smiled again, and we sat. For the first 20 minutes, everything was fine. He asked about my job, graphic design for a publishing house, and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. He was articulate, funny in a self-deprecating way, and he had that quiet listening quality that made you feel like your words had weight. Then, somewhere between the second glass of wine and the arrival of our atres, he mentioned his ex. It was casual at first, a passing remark about how she never liked French food. I ignored it, but then he brought up another ex, then another, each story more detailed than the last. He wasn't just reminiscing, he was unraveling, telling me about one who cheated on him with his roommate, another who left without saying goodbye, one who accused him of being too intense, because he kept a journal of everything she said to him during their relationship. I tried to smile, to nod politely, but my appetite was gone. "It's always the same," he said, staring down at his untouched plate. "They say they want honesty, and then they run from it." I shifted in my seat. Maybe they just weren't the right people. He looked up sharply. "No, they were right. I was too much. I cared too much. I didn't know what to say." He laughed softly, like he was in on some private joke. "You're probably thinking, wow, fourth date material, not first." I forced a smile. "A bit." He nodded solemnly. "I get it. You're not the first to say that." I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. Asked if he'd traveled anywhere recently. He told me he hadn't left the state in years. That he didn't like airports. That he used to fly often before his ex, the one named Morel, convinced him that the sky was a place where people left and never came back. I thought he was being metaphorical. But he wasn't. She left during a thunderstorm, he said, looking past me. Packed in the night. Didn't even take her toothbrush. I watched her taxi disappear down the street. I counted the seconds between the lightning and the thunder. Corvin, I said gently, maybe we should talk about something else. He blinked. Of course. Sorry. Sometimes I don't know how much is too much. I nodded, relieved. But then he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Do you ever feel haunted by people who are still alive? I froze. He smiled, a sad, crooked smile. I do. All the time. Morel, especially. She's in my apartment. Not physically, but in the walls. In the temperature. I'll be washing dishes, and suddenly the room goes cold. Or I'll be halfway through brushing my teeth, and I'll hear her humming behind me. I swallowed. That sounds difficult. He nodded. I don't think she left properly. I think some part of her stayed behind. Most people don't finish things cleanly, you know. They leave pieces of themselves. And we carry them. I was no longer sure if I was on a first date or trapped in a therapy session with a man unraveling in real time. I checked my phone discreetly. An hour and a half had passed. He noticed. You don't have to stay. I know I'm a lot. I hesitated. It's not that. Early meeting tomorrow. He nodded, looking down at his hands. Of course. The waiter brought the check, and I reached for my wallet, but Corvin stopped me. I'll get it, he said. It's the least I can do. I thanked him, stood, and gathered my coat. As we walked out, he turned to me and said quietly, You have kind eyes, but I can tell you're already halfway out the door. I didn't answer. I just gave him a small smile and walked to my car. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning, I woke up to a message from an unknown number. You don't have to run. I'm not like them. I blocked the number. 2 days later, another message came. Different number. You looked beautiful under the candlelight. I wish I could show you what I see. I blocked it too. Then the letters started. No return address. Just folded sheets of thick, unlined paper slipped into my mailbox. The first one was a poem. About a woman with moonlight in her veins who doesn't yet realize she's already part of someone else's story. The second letter included a photograph. Of me. Taken through my apartment window. I contacted the police. They took a report, but said there was no direct threat, no law broken. Just someone with bad boundaries, they said. Elia felt horrible. She tried calling Corvin, but his number was disconnected. She swore she hadn't seen him since the night we met. I bought new curtains. Changed my locks. Got a security camera installed. It didn't matter. Notes continued arriving. One was taped to my front door. Don't be afraid. I'm just listening. You talk in your sleep. Another came with a small velvet pouch containing a lock of hair. I don't know if it was mine. I didn't want to check. I moved out 6 weeks later. Left the city entirely. Cut contact with everyone except my sister. I didn't leave a forwarding address. I deleted my social media. Changed my name on every account. Silence, finally. Until last week. I was walking home from work in my new city, new name, new apartment, new life, when I passed a bookstore with a small display in the window. A collection of local poetry chapbooks. One was titled Still Room for Her Ghost. The author was listed as Corvin Black. The cover was a photograph. Of me. Sitting at that restaurant table. Candlelight in my eyes. The same night we met. I stood there for a full minute, heart pounding, unable to move. I went inside and flipped through the pages. Each poem was about a woman named Lyra. A woman who smelled of antique pages and spoke in lowercase. A woman who is everywhere now, even in the silence between walls. I bought the book. Not because I wanted it, but because I needed to know if he was still watching. And the last page confirmed it. A short poem. 4 lines. No title. She left once, and I let her. She left twice, and I followed. She leaves again, but I'm already there. Behind the glass, inside the wall. I burned the book, but the words are still in my head. And sometimes when I walk past mirrors, I think I see him just behind me. Smiling. Saying nothing. Waiting for me to finish the story. I first stumbled across Caliph on a dating app called Ember, a platform supposedly designed to match people with artistic sensibilities. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to talk to over a drink. After 2 years of living alone in Drowsen Hollow, a city where the rain never seemed to stop and the skyline was permanently gray, I figured a little human contact wouldn't hurt. Her profile caught my eye, not because she was stunning, though she was, but because of the way she framed her photographs. They weren't selfies. They were portraits. Carefully composed, with dim lighting, shadows in the right places, expressions caught mid-thought. She looked like she belonged in an art house film. Vintage coats, chipped nail polish, eyes that always seemed to be watching something just beyond the camera. Her bio read, "I find beauty in stillness and stories in silence." Pretentious? Maybe. Intriguing? Absolutely. We messaged for about a week. She was funny in a dry, offbeat way. Her vocabulary was precise, her grammar meticulous, and her questions always personal, but never invasive. She wanted to know about my childhood, my fears, my favorite textures, actual textures. I told her I liked old velvet and the feeling of pages in worn books. She said she liked the cold sting of camera metal against her palms. I suggested a drink. She agreed immediately. We met at a bar called the Lowlight, a narrow, moody venue tucked between two abandoned storefronts in Drowson's crumbling arts district. The place was lit by antique lamps, with thick velvet curtains and a haze of cigarette fog that clung to the air like a memory. It smelled like bourbon and dust. She was already there when I arrived. Caleth sat in a corner booth, her phone in hand, angling it toward the low candlelight as if trying to capture the flickering shadows on her wine glass. She looked exactly like her photos. Short platinum hair, pale like silver in the dim light. Black turtleneck. A coat draped beside her with an old film camera peeking out of the pocket. "Hi," I said. She looked up and smiled, but didn't stand. She gestured for me to sit across from her. "You're very punctual," she said. "I try." She tilted her head. "You don't know how rare that is." We ordered drinks. The first 20 minutes were easy. We talked about film photography, old music videos, and the way most people only ever see each other through screens. She said she hated selfies but loved candid shots, especially the ones people didn't realize were being taken. I laughed. "You mean like street photography?" "Sort of," she said, "but more intimate, more documentary. I like to capture people in their real moments, the ones they don't mean to share." There was something about the way she said it. Not creepy. Not yet. Just intense. At one point, she asked if she could take a picture of me. "Just one," she said. "For memory's sake." I hesitated. "I'm not really a fan of being photographed." "That's why it matters," she replied, already raising her phone. It was quick, one shutter click, and she smiled like she'd caught something special. I brushed it off, but inside I felt a small flicker of unease. I told myself it was just nerves. After another round of drinks, she asked if we could take a few selfies together. I wasn't big on it, but I figured sure. Why not? 1 or 2 photos wouldn't kill me. She snapped the first one with us smiling. Then another with me sipping my drink. Then one where I was looking away. Then another. And another. Always when I wasn't ready. Always when I wasn't looking. I noticed her switching angles, tilting her phone to frame me from below. From the side. She even leaned across the table at one point to take one from over my shoulder. "What are you doing?" I asked. She looked up like she hadn't heard the question. "I'm just trying to get the real you. Not the face you think you have. The one that slips out when you're not performing." I laughed awkwardly. "That's kind of intense for a first date." She shrugged. I like to remember people clearly. Something in her tone made me shiver. I didn't think much of it until 3 nights later. I was scrolling through my social media feed when I saw a tagged photo notification. It was from an account I didn't recognize at focus.in.shadows. The profile had no bio. Just a series of grainy black and white photos. Street scenes. People on trains. Couples fighting on benches. Children crying in back alleys. And then me. My heart skipped. There I was, in that same booth at the Lowlight. The photo was taken from across the bar. I was sipping my drink, eyes cast down. The lighting made the shadows under my eyes deeper, more hollow. I looked, haunted. And then another photo. Me again. This time clearly unaware. I was mid-laugh. My hand blurred from motion. Then another. And another. Each photo more invasive than the last. One was from behind me. The back of my head, with the curve of my neck exposed. She wasn't in any of them. Just me. Alone. Vulnerable. I messaged her immediately. "Why are these on that account?" She replied almost instantly. "You're beautiful when you aren't guarding yourself." I didn't respond. She messaged again. "Do you want me to take them down?" I hesitated. "Yes. Please." "Okay. But I think it's a shame." The photos disappeared within the hour. But that wasn't the end. A week passed. I didn't hear from her again. I assumed that was it. A weird date with someone who got too attached to their camera. I could move on. Then I got the envelope. No return address. Inside was a roll of developed film. I held the negatives up to the light, heart pounding. They were all of me. Walking to my car. Unlocking my apartment door. Sleeping. The last photo froze my blood. It was from the foot of my bed. I was asleep, curled on my side. My mouth slightly open. The timestamp was from 2 nights ago. I checked all my locks. My windows. There was no sign of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. But I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed up with a knife in my hand, watching the shadows crawl across my walls. I moved apartments. Changed my number. Deleted my social media. I thought it was over. Until last week. I was walking home from work when I saw a flyer stapled to a telephone pole. It was printed on thick, matte paper. A photo. Of me. Taken from behind as I walked down the street. The caption beneath it read, "He never sees me, but I see all of him." I tore it down, but now I see them everywhere. I shouldn't have said yes. Even now I don't know why I did. I wasn't the type to go hiking with strangers, especially not someone I'd only known online for a few weeks. But there was something about Thorn. His messages were disarmingly kind, unpolished in a way that felt real. He didn't pepper me with emojis or empty compliments. He asked strange questions, told me stories about his childhood in the hills, said things like, "People forget that the woods see more than they say." I thought it was poetic. I thought he was just eccentric. We met through a niche hiking forum. He'd posted a thread about underrated Appalachian trails without tourists, and I commented that I liked the solitude of lesser-known paths. He messaged me, and we began talking about books, music, and hiking mishaps. He sent photos, blurry selfies on trailheads, boots muddied to the laces, forests with trees bent at odd angles. I told myself this was harmless. So when he suggested we meet up to hike a trail called Hollow's End, I hesitated, but curiosity won. He said it was beautiful, untouched, that hardly anyone went there anymore. "It used to be a settler path," he wrote, "but no one remembers it now. That's what makes it special." I told a friend where I'd be. I shared my location. I packed pepper spray and a folding knife, told myself I was being safe. Hollow's End wasn't listed on any official trail maps. He gave me GPS coordinates instead. The trailhead was off a cracked back road lined with rusting mailboxes and empty barns. I got there first. The parking area was just a dirt clearing beside a rotting wooden sign that simply read, "Hollow's End." I nearly turned back right then, but I didn't. Thorn showed up 10 minutes later in a battered green Subaru that looked like it belonged to a survivalist. He stepped out of the car with a quiet smile and a backpack slung over one shoulder. He was taller than I expected. Thinner too. He wore old hiking boots, cargo pants, and a gray hoodie that looked like it had seen better days. His black hair was tied back, and his eyes were a startling shade of pale amber, almost yellow in the sunlight. "Ready?" he asked, and we began. The trail started out normal enough. Crunching leaves underfoot, the smell of pine and soil, birdsong in the distance. Thorn walked ahead of me with a confident, deliberate stride, occasionally pointing out things I would have missed. A cluster of mushrooms shaped like teeth, a tree with claw marks. "You come out here often?" I asked. He gave a small nod. "It's quiet. No one else comes out this far." "Not anymore." "Why not?" He paused. "They say the trail's cursed." I laughed nervously, assuming he was joking. "They do," he said, still walking. "Old settler legend. They say the forest doesn't like to lose what it finds." I stopped laughing. About an hour in, the trail narrowed. The trees grew denser, the air colder. There were no trail markers, no signs, no sound beyond our footsteps and the occasional creak of branches above. I noticed that the birdsong had stopped. Thorn didn't mention it. He just kept walking. That's when I saw the first one. A wooden plank nailed to a tree. The words were burned into the surface, not written. "Turn back." I stopped. "Did you see this?" I asked, pointing. Thorn glanced at it and shrugged. "Old prank, probably. Teens come out here sometimes." But I didn't buy it. The sign didn't look old. The edges weren't weathered. The bark around the nail was fresh. Someone had put it there recently. We kept walking. Then came another. "You shouldn't be here." Thorn walked past it without a glance. I followed, but the dread in my chest was growing. The ground became uneven. Roots twisted out like veins, and the trees leaned inward, as if they were bending to watch us. The light dimmed, and it wasn't just the clouds. It was like the forest itself was swallowing the sky. I tried to make a joke to cut the tension. Do you know where we're going? Thorne stopped, turned to me slowly. There's a clearing, he said. You'll want to see it. There was something in his voice I didn't like. Too calm. Too rehearsed. We reached the clearing 20 minutes later. It was an oval-shaped patch of dead grass surrounded by trees that grew in a perfect circle. No underbrush. No sound. Just silence so thick it felt like cotton in my ears. Scattered around the clearing were more signs. Some nailed to trees. Others stuck in the ground. All with messages burned into them. No one leaves. Stay still. They'll understand soon enough. One sign was half buried in the dirt. I knelt to read it. Sarah. My name. My breath caught in my throat. I stood and turned to Thorne. He was standing at the edge of the clearing, watching me. You brought me here, I said. Why? His expression didn't change. I told you. It's a special place. My legs trembled. I backed away slowly. I'm leaving. He didn't argue. Didn't move to stop me. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The forest warped around me. The trail was gone. Every path looked the same. Trees with identical knots and splits. I ran until my lungs burned. I tripped, fell, scrambled up again. And then I saw it. A figure ahead of me. Not Thorne. Taller. Gaunt. Skin like ash bark. It stood motionless, watching. I backed away, turned, ran in another direction. Another figure. And another. They stood at the edges of vision. Never moving. Never speaking. I ran until I saw the trailhead. My car. I didn't stop. I jumped in, locked the doors, and sped away, tires spraying gravel. In the rearview mirror, I saw Thorne standing in the clearing, just beyond the trees. Smiling. I filed a police report. They found Hollow's End. But the trail didn't match my description. There was no clearing. No signs. No name burned into the ground. The police said it was likely a misunderstanding. Maybe I got turned around. Hallucinated from stress or dehydration. I know what I saw. But it gets worse. 3 weeks later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Me, standing in the clearing. Behind me, barely visible in the treeline, was a figure. My back was turned, but the expression on my face was frozen in time. Fear. And on the back of the photo, written in scorched letters. You came back. I met him on a Tuesday. His name was Leor, and he messaged me first. Not with some tired line or a gif, but with a sentence I kept rereading for its strangeness. You look like the kind of person who knows where to stand in a museum. I didn't respond right away. I screenshotted the message and sent it to my friend Noah with the caption, "Poet or pickpocket?" She replied, "Both. Meet him. I'm bored." So I did. We arranged to meet at a speakeasy-style bar nestled under an old bookstore, the kind of place where the drinks came in mismatched vintage glasses, and the menus were printed on the backs of old library cards. It was called the Lantern Room, and the lighting was so dim it felt like you were drinking in a memory. He arrived 10 minutes late, but with a smile that made you forgive things. He wore a charcoal pea coat and a scarf twisted like it had been done without a mirror. His hair was dark and slightly damp from the rain. He looked like someone who always had somewhere better to be, but had chosen to be here, just for you. "Zadie?" he asked, brushing a hand through his hair. "Yes," I said, standing up. He stepped forward and kissed me on the cheek. "Sorry I'm late. I got caught in a story I didn't want to leave." "What story?" "A man who forgets his own name and starts remembering other people's lives instead." I laughed. "Is that a book or a metaphor?" He grinned. "Yes." We sat. We ordered drinks. He had an old-fashioned. I had something with rosemary and gin that tasted like a winter garden. He was charming in a way that didn't feel rehearsed. He listened well. He asked thoughtful questions. He told stories that made me lean in without realizing it. One about a trip to Lisbon where he lost his shoes and ended up walking through a cathedral barefoot. Another about a woman he'd met in Paris who claimed she could read a person's future by the way they held their glass. "She said I was meant for brief things," he said, smiling at the memory. "Brief and bright." "Do you believe her?" He looked at me. "I think some people are best remembered in flashes." We talked for 3 hours. When the bill came, he reached into his coat pocket, then frowned. "Oh," he said, checking another pocket. "This is embarrassing. I think I forgot my wallet." My stomach tightened slightly, but I smiled. "It happens." He looked genuinely flustered. I swear I had it when I left the apartment. Maybe it fell out in the cab. I waved it off. Don't worry, I've got it. You sure? I can Venmo you. It's fine. He looked at me like I'd just saved his life. I owe you. Next round's on me. Or brunch. Or both. We left the bar and stood in the soft drizzle that had started again. He looked up at the sky and sighed. Rain makes everything feel like a secret, he said. Then he leaned in and kissed me. Gentle. Not rushed. Text me when you get home, he asked. I will. He smiled and walked off into the night, hands in his pockets. I got home and realized something was off. My purse was lighter. I opened it and stared. My wallet was gone. I emptied the bag. Checked the pockets. The lining. The floor around the entryway. Nothing. I checked my coat. My pants. The kitchen counter. The bathroom. Gone. My throat tightened. I opened my phone and checked my banking app. There were 3 new charges. One at a liquor store, one at a boutique hotel, and one at a gas station on the other side of town. All within the last hour. I called my bank and froze the card. Reported the theft. They asked if it was a lost card or if I suspected fraud. My mouth tasted like metal when I said, fraud. I texted him. Hey, I think you might have left with my wallet. No response. Another message. I'm not accusing you, just trying to retrace steps. Still nothing. I called the number from our messages. Disconnected. I went back to the dating app. His profile was gone. No trace. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, stomach in knots. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I filed a police report. The officer at the desk nodded like she'd heard it all before. Pretty common scam, she said. They charm you. Get close. Lift the wallet during a hug or while you're distracted. Then vanish. But he didn't seem like. I stopped myself. They never seem like that. I left the station feeling stupid, angry, violated. Not even because of the money. It was the intimacy he'd created. The illusion. He'd made me feel like I was part of something fleeting and beautiful, when really, I was just a mark. I went through the rest of the week like I was underwater. Then, 3 days later, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was my wallet. Everything was in it, cards, ID, even the $20 I kept hidden in that tiny zip pocket. Nothing missing. Taped to the inside was a note. Typed. I didn't need to keep it. I just wanted to hold something that had touched you. My skin went cold. The font was clean. Serif. Precise. The kind of note you'd expect to find in a museum exhibit. Or a crime scene. I took the wallet back to the police. Showed them the note. They opened the case again. Took fingerprints. Checked the envelope. Nothing. No prints. No trace. I changed the locks. Canceled the cards again. I stopped answering calls from unknown numbers. But the story didn't end there. 2 weeks later, I got a message on Instagram from a profile with no photo and no followers. Do you remember how the gin tasted? I do. I blocked it. A day later, another message from a different account. I found your favorite museum. It's smaller than I expected. I hadn't told him my favorite museum. I hadn't told him much of anything. But I'd posted a photo of it 6 months ago. It was buried deep in my feed, below dozens of others. The caption was a quote from an exhibit about memory. I deleted the post. Then the whole account. I told myself it was over. Then my friend Noah called me in a panic. Zadie, someone just tried to follow me home. What? I swear to God, he looked like that guy you went out with. The one from the bar. I only saw his face for a second, but he was standing under the awning across the street, just watching. Are you okay? I ran into a grocery store. He didn't follow me. But I'm freaked out. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. Then I remembered something. The woman in the Paris story. She said I was meant for brief things. That line. It wasn't his. I'd read it before, years ago. In a short story by an obscure writer I used to love. I'd underlined that line in my old journal. I dug the journal out of my closet, flipped through the pages. There it was. Same phrasing. Word for word. I flipped back to the page before it. And there, in the corner, was a name I'd written in the margin. Lior. Not from the story. From a different entry. A guy I'd met at a gallery opening 2 years ago. Same eyes. Same crooked smile. He'd ghosted me after 1 date. No message. No warning. I remembered thinking he'd been made up in a dream. And now he'd returned. Different name. Same act. I realized then, I hadn't been the only one. And I wouldn't be the last. His name was Idris. We matched on an app one barely remember downloading. I'd been in a strange mood that week, tired of the silence, tired of the scrolling. His profile was unassuming. A single photo, him in an oversized coat, leaning against a brick wall, looking away from the camera. His bio said, "Asking the right questions is more intimate than touching." I should have known better. We met for coffee at a place called Clarity House. Minimalist furniture, white walls, windows that let in too much light. He was already seated when I arrived, sipping black coffee from a ceramic cup, no phone in sight. "Zara?" he asked, standing to shake my hand. His palm was dry and warm. "Yes," I said, and sat across from him. From the start, something about him felt fixed, as if he was fully present in a way most people weren't. He never broke eye contact. He didn't fidget. He didn't seem bored or distracted or waiting for his turn to speak. At first, it was refreshing. Then the questions started. "What's the worst thing your parents ever said to you?" I blinked. "That's a little intense for a first date." He tilted his head, smiling faintly. "You don't have to answer. I just like to know what shaped people." I shrugged it off. I'd had worse openers. We kept talking. He asked where I grew up, what my childhood bedroom looked like, the name of my first pet. I told him, carefully editing as I went. When I asked what he did for work, he said, "I freelance. Mostly data mapping." I didn't know what that meant. He avoided talking about himself. Every question I asked came back to me. "Do you believe in fate? What's the last lie you told someone you love? Would you rather be watched or forgotten?" That one made me pause. "I don't know," I said. "Neither sounds great." He nodded slowly. "Most people say that, but you hesitated." After an hour, I suggested we go for a walk. The coffee shop felt too bright, too exposed. Outside, the sun was low, painting everything in soft gold. We walked without direction, down side streets and into quieter parts of the neighborhood. He asked more questions. "How often do you cry? What password do you use most often?" I stared at him. "Kidding," he said quickly. "Just seeing if you were still paying attention." But I wasn't laughing. We reached a small park with a narrow path that wound through a patch of trees. I slowed my steps, suddenly unsure if I wanted to go deeper into the shade with him. "I think I'll head back," I said. "Early morning tomorrow." He didn't argue, just nodded again, calm as ever. "I enjoyed our conversation," he said. "Not many people are honest." I forced a smile. "Thanks." As I turned to leave, I noticed a car idling across the street. Matte black. Windows tinted too dark to see through. It wasn't moving, but the engine was running. I glanced back at Idris. He was still standing there, hands in his coat pockets, watching me. I walked home quickly, checking over my shoulder more than once. The car didn't follow. At least, not that I could tell. That night, I didn't sleep well. The next day, I got a text from an unknown number. "You looked beautiful when you smiled at the pigeons." I hadn't told anyone about that. It had happened after the date, on my walk home. I'd paused near the fountain, laughed as a bird waddled toward my feet. I blocked the number. 2 days later, I received another message. "Your door makes a soft creak when you lock it, like it's whispering." I checked the locks. Nothing looked tampered with. I installed a new deadbolt and bought a camera for the hallway. But the messages kept coming. "Do you ever feel like you're being studied? The green sweater suits you. It makes you look softer. I don't think you even know what you're afraid of." I called the police. They took a report. I showed them the messages, mentioned the date. They asked if I'd ever invited him to my home, given him my address. I hadn't. They said there wasn't much they could do unless he entered the property or made a direct threat. I started taking different routes home. I wiped my social media. I switched to private accounts, changed my passwords. Then one evening, I noticed the black car again. Parked across the street. Lights off. Engine silent this time. I didn't go outside. The next morning, a package was waiting at my door. No return address. Inside was a flash drive and a neatly folded sheet of paper. The note read, "It's not stalking if it's a study." I didn't plug in the drive. I took it to the police. They confiscated it and told me they'd add it to the file. I asked if they'd found anything on Idris. "There's no record of anyone by that name matching your description," the officer said. "No social media, no official ID, nothing in the local database." I stopped going out alone. 6 days later, someone left a Polaroid on my windowsill. It showed me sitting in my kitchen reading. Taken from outside through the glass. I'd been alone. I moved apartments 3 days later. New locks. New number. No forwarding address. No more dating apps. His name was Kale. We met through an app one rarely used, during a week I barely remember. I'd been working 12-hour shifts and sleeping through most of my weekends. A friend convinced me to try dating again, just to break the rhythm of work and silence. I downloaded the app, swiped on a few profiles, and matched with him the same evening. Kale's photos were black and white. He had that quiet, artistic look, slightly tousled hair, a faint scar near his eyebrow, and a crooked smile that looked more like a secret. His bio was short. I like people who don't smile when they're supposed to. I didn't know what that meant, but I messaged him anyway. He responded quickly. Polite, thoughtful, and sometimes cryptic. He recommended books I'd never heard of, and told me he liked wandering antique stores alone. We talked for 3 days before he asked if I wanted to meet. I agreed. We chose a quiet bar called Elliot's Hollow, tucked into the corner of downtown, where low lighting and soft jazz made everyone feel like they were in a movie scene. I arrived 5 minutes early. He was already there, sitting at the back, sipping something dark from a heavy glass. He stood when he saw me. His coat was too thin for the weather, but he didn't seem to notice. Up close, his eyes were a strange shade, too pale to be brown, too stormy to be hazel. He smelled faintly of cedarwood and cold air. Ria? He asked, tilting his head. Yes, I said, and offered a small smile. He smiled back, but only briefly. We talked for 2 hours. He asked strange questions, not inappropriate, just unexpected. Do you dream in color? Have you ever walked into a room and felt like you were being watched, even when no one was there? Do you believe people can leave parts of themselves behind in the places they've lived? I told him I wasn't sure about any of those things. He nodded like he respected that, like uncertainty was preferable to false conviction. At the end of the night, he offered to walk me to my car. I hesitated, but agreed. He didn't touch me, didn't ask for a hug or a kiss. Just smiled and said, I hope you sleep well tonight. I drove home feeling unsettled, not in a bad way. Just watched. The next morning, I found a message from him. You looked like someone trying not to disappear last night. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't respond. He didn't message again that day or the next. A week passed. Then I found the note. It was in my mailbox. No envelope. Folded neatly, pressed flat. My name was typed across the front, just Ria, in a serif font like something from a typewriter. I opened it. I know how hard it is to be seen. Sometimes I think we only exist when someone is looking at us. I'm still looking. There was no signature. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe it wasn't even from him. Maybe it was part of a local art project. People left weird things in mailboxes all the time, right? Another week passed. I didn't hear from Kale. I thought it was over. Then I found the second note. This one was slipped under my apartment door. Same paper. Same font. You lock your door twice. Once out of habit. The second time because of what you've imagined. My stomach dropped. I hadn't told anyone about that habit. I checked the locks. Nothing was broken. No signs of forced entry. Just that sheet of paper, folded cleanly, like it had been placed there with care. I blocked his number. Deleted the app. I didn't know what else to do. The next night, I heard a knock at the door. Soft. Deliberate. I didn't move. After a minute, it stopped. In the morning, there was no one outside. But tucked between my doormat and the tile floor was another note. You're most beautiful when you're scared. I called the police. They came. Took a report. Asked if I had any enemies. Any exes with unresolved feelings. I told them about Kale. Showed them the messages, the notes. They said they'd look into it. That night, I slept with a knife under my pillow. 2 days later, another note arrived. This time, it was taped to my bathroom mirror. That's what broke me. I hadn't left the window open. The door had been locked. I hadn't heard anything. But there it was, in the center of the glass, dead center at eye level. I like this version of you. The one that doesn't pretend. I packed a bag and left that night. I stayed at a friend's place across the city. Didn't tell anyone where I'd gone. I turned off my phone. Changed my email. Got a new number. I didn't go outside for 3 days. On the 4th night, I got a text from an unknown number. You can shut the blinds, but I still know how you move. I didn't know how he found me. I didn't want to know. I moved again. This time, I left the city entirely. Changed jobs. Rented a studio apartment under a different name. I became a ghost of my former self. I didn't date. I didn't engage. I didn't let anyone know where I lived. For 6 months, there was silence. And then, last week, I woke up to find the mirror in my apartment fogged, though I hadn't used the shower. In the center of the glass, written with a fingertip. I never stopped looking. His name was Ren. We met at a friend of a friend's engagement party, which I almost didn't attend. It had been raining all day, one of those long, gray soaks that makes everything feel heavier than it should. I showed up late, parked 3 blocks away, and was already regretting it when I stepped inside and saw all the smiling couples and wine glasses balanced on fingertips. Ren stood near the fireplace, alone, holding a glass of champagne like it was unfamiliar. He had that look people get when they're trying to appear relaxed, but are really scanning everyone in the room. I noticed him noticing me. He smiled first. He was charming. Not in the slick, rehearsed way most men are, but in a quiet, studied way. His voice was low and warm, and when he asked questions, he listened carefully, nodding like my words had weight. We talked about books. He loved Don DeLillo, which I pretended to remember more of, and music, and the strange feeling of being in rooms where you don't quite belong. He said he'd only known the groom for a few months. Work connections, he said. But I'm glad I came. He asked for my number before I left, and I gave it to him, partly because I felt seen, partly because I didn't want to go home feeling like nothing had changed. We texted for a week. He wasn't overly persistent, just present, thoughtful. He'd send me songs to listen to, articles he thought I might like. One night, he sent a blurry photo of a carousel horse and said, "This reminded me of something you said about childhood. Don't know why." And then he asked if I wanted to go for a walk. "Somewhere quiet," he said. "Just to talk." I agreed. We met at Briarcliff Park, a massive, forested sprawl just outside the city. It used to be a private estate, back in the early 1900s, and still had crumbling stone benches and moss-covered gazebos scattered between the trees. It was the kind of place that felt like it had too many memories, some of which didn't belong to the living. The sun was beginning to set when I arrived. The sky was a pale purple, and the leaves were brittle and dry, crunching underfoot with every step. Ren was waiting near the entrance, wearing a wool coat and gloves, holding 2 paper cups of tea. "Figured it might get cold," he said, handing me a cup. We began to walk. It started easily enough. He asked about my week, and I told him about a project at work that had gone sideways. He laughed at the right moments, offered sympathetic nods. He told me he'd been freelance editing historical manuscripts, obscure stuff mostly, and liked it because it let him live in forgotten time. I told him that was the most poetic thing I'd heard in weeks. He looked pleased, but only briefly. We reached a long, winding path that led to a small pond. The water was still. The surface was scattered with leaves, and the air smelled faintly of wet bark and something else I couldn't quite place. We stood there in silence for a moment. Then I noticed him looking past me. His entire posture shifted, like someone had pressed pause. I turned to follow his gaze. A woman in a red coat was walking slowly along the far edge of the pond. Her hair was dark, tied back. She moved with a kind of float to her step, like she wasn't fully grounded. She didn't look at us. Didn't even seem to notice we were there. "Do you know her?" I asked. Ren didn't answer. He was still staring, eyes locked on her like she was a flicker of something he didn't trust to be real. "Ren." He blinked and looked away quickly. "Sorry. No. Just thought she looked familiar." I watched him for a moment. His hands were trembling slightly, his tea forgotten. Something flickered across his face. Guilt? Recognition? Dread? "Are you okay?" He smiled, too quickly. "Yeah. Just weird vibe. You know how sometimes a place feels off all of a sudden?" I nodded slowly. But the air had changed. The temperature had dipped. I could feel it in my teeth. We continued walking, but his mood had shifted. He was quieter now, glancing over his shoulder more often. Once, he stopped completely and turned around like he'd heard something behind us. "Are you sure you didn't know her?" I asked again. He hesitated. "She looked like someone I used to know," he said eventually. "A long time ago." "An ex?" He didn't answer. I let it go. We looped through the park for another 20 minutes. By the time we reached the parking lot, it was dark. The trees cast long, crooked shadows, and the only sound was the soft tick of cooling engines. He walked me to my car and thanked me for coming. "I'd like to see you again," he said. I nodded. "I'd like that too." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I drove home with the radio on low and the windows barely cracked, trying to shake the strange weight that had settled in my chest. The next day, I looked him up online. I don't know what I was expecting, maybe just to confirm he existed outside of that night. What I didn't expect was the obituary. It was dated 3 years ago. Elise Marin, 28, found deceased in Briarcliff Park. The article said she'd fallen into the pond, that it was ruled an accidental drowning, though the details were murky. She had no history of mental illness, no signs of struggle. The article included a photo. She was wearing the same red coat. My stomach lurched. I scrolled down. There was a quote from a close friend, someone who had been with her that night. His name, Ren Elric. Same spelling. Same face. A slightly younger version, but unmistakable. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't know what to do. I tried to call him, but the number was suddenly disconnected. I drove to Briarcliff Park 2 days later. I walked the same trail, stopped at the same pond. There was a small plaque now, half hidden under moss. It read, "In memory of Elise Marin. Loved. Missed. Never alone." I looked around. No red coat. No footsteps. Just the wind and the hush of water. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard a knock at my door. Soft. Rhythmic. I didn't move. Another knock. I crept to the peephole. No one was there. But on the doormat was a paper cup of tea. Still warm. The lid had a name written on it. Mine. I didn't want to go. That's the truth. I'd just gotten out of something that wasn't even a relationship. Not really. Just months of uneven texting and wrong timing. But it had left me brittle. I had no interest in hearing someone else's stories, or pretending mine weren't still bleeding at the edges. But my coworker, Nell, insisted. She said she had a friend, well, a friend of a friend, who was funny, smart, and emotionally literate. That last one made me laugh out loud. I should have known then. His name was Kalen. He suggested a jazz bar called Mothglass, tucked into an alley behind a closed-down bookbindery. It was one of those places where the air always smelled like clove cigarettes and old leather couches. I got there early, nervous in a way I hadn't been in years, and sat at the bar nursing a glass of watered-down mezcal. He arrived 5 minutes late. Tall, pale, hair the color of burnt straw, a little messy in a way someone probably told him was charming once. He wore a black peacoat and a scarf that looked like it had survived a decade of winters. His eyes were green, but not the inviting kind, more like the kind of green you find in pond water left too long in shadow. Still, he smiled easily. Thanked me for coming. Hopped up on the stool beside mine like it was nothing. Raya, right? He asked. Right. We ordered drinks. The first half hour was fine. Basic questions. What do you do? What do you like? What brings you here? He told me he worked in archival restoration, old documents, mostly. Said he liked things that had been forgotten. I guess I just like things that outlived their purpose, he said, half laughing. They feel closer to the truth. I nodded, unsure what that meant, but intrigued. Then he asked me if I'd ever been in love. I blinked. That's a big question for a first drink. He smiled. I think it's the only question. I gave a cautious answer. Yes, once. Maybe twice. And you? That's when it began. The first story came out slow. A woman named Celia. He met her at a film screening. She wore red gloves and quoted Russian poets. He loved her instantly. She left him after 2 years. She said I was too heavy, he said, sipping his drink. That I pulled her down. I tried to nod sympathetically, to move the conversation forward, but he kept going. Then came Ariane. She was a sculptor. He described her laugh, her apartment, her habit of humming when she was anxious. She left him too. She said he was too observant, that he saw things she didn't want to be seen. It was uncomfortable, but not unbearable yet. I told myself he was just being open. People process in different ways. But then came the others. One after another. Names I couldn't keep up with. Details that didn't belong in a bar conversation. One had a miscarriage. Another tried to set their apartment on fire. One disappeared for 3 weeks and came back with a shaved head and a new name. He told me about the time he found a note in someone's coat pocket that said, "You're not the only one." He told me how that felt. I still have the note, he said softly. I keep it in my wallet. To remind me. I stared at him. Kalen, I know, he cut in quickly. I know this is a lot. Too much. I always do this. I always think if I just say it out loud, the weight will lift. It doesn't. No, he whispered. It just grows legs. I laughed nervously. That's poetic. He didn't laugh with me. I used to write songs, he said, but they all turned into letters I never sent. The bar felt suddenly colder. The jazz in the background blurred into something dissonant. I looked over his shoulder, and could see the reflection of us in the mirror behind the bar. He looked smaller in the glass, like he was sinking into the stool. Do you want to order food or? I haven't even told you about Lyrian. I didn't want to know about Lyrian. I wanted to go home. I wanted to take a shower and scrub the stories off my skin. She was the one, he said. I don't mean that in the cliché way. I mean she was the one who saw all the others and didn't flinch. She stayed. Until she didn't. What happened? He looked at me for a long time before answering. She stopped answering her phone. I went to her place. It was empty. Just a mattress and a single chair. But on the chair, she'd left a recording. I waited. What did it say? He smiled. Not sadly. Not bitterly. Just emptily. She said, "You collect women like tombstones." I didn't know what to say. I think that's unfair, he added. I never meant to bury anyone. I stood up. Kaylin, I think I'm going to head out. He looked surprised, like he'd genuinely forgotten this was a date and not some confessional. Oh, of course, he said. Sorry. I didn't mean to. It's fine. Just, yeah. Take care. I left without waiting for him to stand. Outside, the air was damp and heavy. I didn't look back. But that night, I dreamed of him. In the dream, I was walking through a cemetery. But instead of names, each tombstone had a photo. Women. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them. All different ages, different styles, different smiles. But they were all looking at me. And Kaylin was there, sitting cross-legged on the grass with a notebook in his lap. He looked up and said, I remember all of them. I didn't respond. He turned a page. I'm remembering you now. I woke up sweating. I told myself it was just a bad date, that I was projecting, that my own unresolved stuff had twisted the evening into something it wasn't. But then the email came. 2 days later. No subject line. No sender name. Just the message. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I just wanted to be known. Even for an hour. Even by a stranger. I didn't reply. But a week later, I got another. I think you were the kindest one. You didn't flinch as much. That meant something. I blocked the address. A month passed. Then one morning, I found an envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. Raya. I hope you're well. I've been thinking about that night. You were the only one who didn't look away when I said her name. I think that means something. I hope you're not lonely. Or if you are, I hope you're the kind of lonely that builds, not breaks. Kaylin. There was no return address. No sign of how he found where I lived. I moved apartments 2 weeks later. I don't use the same name on dating apps anymore. Sometimes when I walk past people in cafes, I think I hear him talking. Not to anyone in particular, just talking softly, like he's whispering memories into the air. And every so often, I hear a name I recognize. Celia. Ariane. Lyrian. And then I hear mine. And I keep walking. Because I don't want to end up as another stone in his mouth. I met Anthony at a dinner party where no one ate dinner. It was one of those events hosted by people who don't believe in chairs. Everyone was standing, holding plates of olives and wine glasses, talking about things they didn't quite understand. Someone was giving an impromptu lecture about the ethics of AI. Another was explaining ayahuasca like they'd invented it. Anthony was leaning against a bookshelf, sipping mezcal and nodding politely at a woman who was describing her third Ayurvedic cleanse. He caught my eye and smiled, a slow, deliberate curve that said, "Finally, someone else who sees through this." I walked over. I wish I hadn't. He introduced himself with a handshake and a quote. "We're all just stories we tell ourselves. I prefer to revise mine in real time." I should have walked away then. But I didn't. Because I'm a sucker for well-phrased nonsense. He asked what I did for work. I told him. He said he was between projects, which turned out to mean he gave talks at boutique retreats about interpersonal liberation. When I asked what that meant, he said, helping people unlearn the prison of monogamy. I laughed. He didn't. I'm serious, he said. Most people don't love. They possess. I waited for the punchline. It never came. Instead, he launched into a philosophy that unraveled like a manifesto he'd practiced in front of a mirror. Love, he said, should be expansive, not restrictive. Most relationships are built on fear, fear of loss, fear of being alone, fear of someone else having what you think is yours. I sipped my drink. So you're poly? He shook his head. That word's been diluted by people who just want to sleep around. I'm post-monogamous. I asked what that meant. He smiled like I'd asked a child's question. It means I don't expect exclusivity. I expect honesty. If you want to connect with someone else, tell me. If I want to, I'll tell you. No secrets. No ownership. Just presence. It was slick. It was rehearsed. But it was also not entirely wrong. I'd been in relationships where jealousy ruled every decision. I'd seen people implode over imagined betrayals. There was something appealing about the clarity he described. Until he kept talking. We ended up going out the following week. Drinks at a moody jazz bar, the kind of place where the drinks cost more than the rent I paid in college. He wore black on black. He smelled like bergamot and some kind of philosophical arrogance. The conversation started well. He asked thoughtful questions, listened, quoted philosophers like he'd swallowed a syllabus. But then the subject turned, inevitably, back to his ideology. I don't do titles, he said. Labels are just boxes we build, so we can feel safe inside them. Okay, I said. But sometimes labels help people know where they stand. That's the problem, he replied. People want certainty. But certainty is an illusion. The only truth is change. It sounded good, until you realized it meant he'd never be accountable for anything. He told me about a woman he was deeply connected to who'd gotten upset when he'd slept with someone else. She said I betrayed her, he said. But how can you betray what you never claimed? I stared at him. Did she know you were seeing other people? She should have, he answered, if she'd been listening. I'm guessing she didn't take that well. She cried for 3 hours, he said, looking faintly bored. But pain is just resistance. I took a long sip of my drink. He leaned in. Most people aren't ready for real intimacy. They want a contract, not a connection. I said nothing. He asked if I wanted to come back to his place. I declined. He smiled, unfazed. No pressure. I just like to offer space. We ended up seeing each other again. I can't say why. Maybe because I wanted to understand him. Maybe because I thought I could argue him into sincerity. Maybe because I was tired of dates that were all surface and no fire. Anthony had plenty of fire, but none of it warmed you. He treated every conversation like a debate, every emotion like a theory to be unpacked. When I told him I'd had a rough day at work, he replied, "You're choosing to suffer. You can opt out." When I mentioned I'd deleted a dating app because it was making me anxious, he said, "That's just attachment trauma. You're externalizing your self-worth." When I told him I was starting to like him, tentatively, clumsily, he said, "That's sweet. But remember, liking is not the same as needing." He never asked how I felt the next day. He never followed up on anything. His approach to intimacy was like a scientist observing bacteria, curious, detached, untouched by the mess of it. I should have ended it, but I didn't. Because I kept thinking, maybe he's right. Maybe I'm just conditioned to expect emotional tracking and reassurance. Maybe I'm the problem. That's the danger of people like Anthony. They don't tell you not to feel. They tell you you're feeling wrong. The last time I saw him, we were at a gallery opening. He knew an artist who painted women without faces. They're about projection, he explained. How we cast our desires onto people instead of seeing them. I looked at the paintings and thought, that's you. You want to be seen as radical, enlightened, free. But you don't see anyone else. Later, while I was looking at a sculpture, his hand brushed my lower back. I turned to find him talking to a woman with short green hair and a tattoo of a crow on her neck. He introduced her as someone extraordinary. I said hello. 10 minutes later, they were gone. He didn't text that night. The next morning, I got a message. Last night was beautiful. Hope you felt free. I didn't reply. He sent another. You seem disappointed. That's okay. Disappointment is just a teacher. I blocked his number. Months later, a friend of mine matched with him on a dating app. She sent me a screenshot. Same quote. Same smile. Same philosophy. She asked if I knew him. I said, "He'll make you feel like you're the one who doesn't get it. But you do. Trust that." She unmatched. I still think about Anthony sometimes. Not because I miss him, but because he taught me something. Not what he intended. He taught me that detachment isn't wisdom. That freedom isn't the absence of care. That relationships aren't cages, but they do require staying. And that someone who refuses to be claimed may also refuse to be held. I used to think rudeness was loud. Interruptions. Talking over someone. Showing up late and never saying sorry. But then I met Bianca. She wasn't loud. She was elsewhere. We matched on a Tuesday. Her profile was short. 2 photos, a dog, and a quote from a TV show I liked. She worked in advertising, mentioned she hated cilantro, and had a playlist of songs that feel like dusk. I thought that was oddly specific and probably meant she had a sense of mood. She messaged first. "Is that a real dog or a rental?" referring to the dog in my profile. I replied that he was mine and very judgmental. She sent a laughing emoji and said she liked judgmental dogs better than judgmental people. We made plans for drinks on Saturday. She picked the place, somewhere downtown with dark lighting and music just loud enough to make you lean in. I got there first. She arrived 5 minutes late. No big deal. She wore a dark red jacket and ankle boots. Her hair was pinned up loosely, like she'd been in a rush but still cared. "Hey," she said, then glanced at her phone. "Sorry. My friend was sending me something ridiculous." I smiled. "No worries." We went inside, found a small table in the corner. She sat down, looked at her phone again, and said, "This place is cute. One SEC. I just have to reply to this." I nodded. It started small. She kept her phone face up on the table. Every few minutes it buzzed. She'd glance down, swipe quickly, then look up and smile like she hadn't missed anything. I asked where she worked. She said something about campaign metrics and brand voice realignment, then paused mid-sentence to type out a response. When she looked up again, she said, "Sorry. My roommate's dating someone new, and it's a whole thing." I laughed politely. "Sounds complicated." "Oh, beyond," she said. "Anyway, what were we talking about?" I wasn't sure we were. Still, I tried. I asked about her dog. She showed me a photo, then 3 more. Then she got a message and giggled. "Sorry," she said. "Inside joke. I'll tell you later." She didn't. She asked what I did for work, and I told her I was in content strategy. "Like SEO and stuff?" she asked. "Kind of," I said. "But more like structuring information so people can find what they need without clicking 5 times. She nodded, eyes scanning her screen. "Sorry, wait. What did you say?" I repeated myself. She nodded again. "Cool. That's cool." We ordered drinks. She posted a photo of hers to her Instagram story. Added a GIF. Then typed something and laughed again. I said, "What's funny?" "Oh," she said. "Nothing important. Just a group chat." She didn't ask what I was drinking. I asked if she liked the bar. She said she'd been there once before but barely remembered it. I think I was with someone who talked too much. She laughed at that. I didn't. Halfway through the date, she said, "I'm being rude, aren't I?" I shrugged. "A little." She smiled. "I know. I'm just tapped in all the time. Bad habit." And then she didn't put her phone away. She just said it, acknowledged it, and kept going. I started counting quietly. In the span of 30 minutes, she checked her phone 9 times. Laughed out loud 3. Sent at least 5 messages. She asked me one more question, what kind of music I liked, then interrupted my answer to record a video of the bar's ceiling lights for her story. I stopped talking mid-sentence. She didn't notice. Eventually, she glanced at the time and said, "I should probably head out soon. My friend's having a thing." I nodded. "Cool." She stood, hugged me briefly, and said, "This was fun. Let's chat again." I smiled. "Sure." She walked out texting. I sat for another 5 minutes, finishing my drink. When I got home, there was a message from her. "Hey, you're really interesting. Hope I wasn't too distracted. Let's hang again." I didn't reply. A few days later, a friend of mine messaged me. "Did you go out with Bianca? She's dating 2 of my friends right now. They're both confused." I wasn't surprised. I wasn't angry either. Just deflated. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't malicious. She was just never fully there. Too many conversations. Too many threads. Too many versions of herself to keep active all at once. I think if I'd asked her about it, she would have said she was just bad at being present. As if it were a personality quirk, not a choice. But presence isn't ambient. You have to show up. And she didn't. At least, not with me. I should have known by the 3rd text. The first was fine. "Hey, looking forward to Saturday." The second was okay. "I'm sorry if I'm slow replying. My ex has been texting nonstop today, face with rolling eyes." And the third? "Do you think it's weird to still be friends with someone who broke your heart and cheated on you?" That was 3 days before we met in person. I could have bowed out then. Should have. But I told myself not to judge prematurely. People vent. Maybe she just needed to get it out of her system before starting something new. Her name was Aressa. Unusual name. Pretty though. She had a sharp laugh, a bit of an edge in her profile bio. "Not here to babysit your ego. I drink mezcal and talk fast." Fine by me. We met at a quiet bar on the east side, one of those dim places with velvet booths and bartenders who make drinks with sprigs of rosemary and smirks. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at the far end of the bar, swirling something clear in a tumbler. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. She stood, hugged me, and said, "You're taller than I expected." "I like that." I smiled. So far, so good. We ordered drinks. She got a mezcal cocktail, of course. I stuck with bourbon. I asked how her day was. She sighed. Not a normal sigh. One of those full body, where do I begin sighs. And that's when it started. "Honestly," she said, "it's been rough. My ex showed up at my apartment this morning. Just showed up. No warning. Banging on my door like some kind of, I don't even know. Like he owns the air around me." I blinked. "Wow. That's a lot. Right?" she said, launching in. "He cheated on me with someone who wore glitter eyeliner and posted quotes from The Alchemist." "I mean, who does that?" I tried to nod sympathetically. "That sounds really." "And the worst part," she interrupted, "he still doesn't think he did anything wrong. He says I was emotionally unavailable because I didn't want to go to his cousin's baby shower. Like, sorry, I have boundaries?" I took a sip of my drink. "Sounds like he didn't respect you." She lit up. "Yes. Exactly. Thank you. Finally, someone who gets it." I smiled, but something in my chest tightened. She kept going. "Anecdotes. Arguments. Screenshots." "Yes." She actually pulled out her phone and showed me a text thread labeled "fire mistake." I glanced around the bar, wondering if the bartender could sense the emotional weight radiating off our booth. At one point, I tried to pivot. I asked what she did for work. "Oh, I'm in PR," she said, waving her hand. "But honestly, everything feels like a distraction right now. I'm trying to focus on healing." I nodded. "That's important." She leaned in. "Do you think people can really change?" I hesitated. "Sometimes. Depends on why they want to." She stared at me for a moment. "You're good at this. You feel solid. Like grounded." I smiled awkwardly. "Thanks." She sighed again. "I shouldn't be dating. I know that. But I hate being alone." There it was. I don't remember what I said to that. Something vague. Supportive. Non-committal. The evening dragged on. Every time I tried to redirect, to movies, music, family, she looped back. Her ex. Her therapist. The time she found glitter in her sheets and knew he'd been with that girl. She ordered another drink. I switched to soda water. Eventually, I said, "I should probably get going soon." She looked surprised. "Already?" "It's getting late," I said gently. She tilted her head. "You're sweet. You remind me of my ex before he got cynical." I offered a tight smile. "That's good." She laughed. "Who knows? Maybe I'm projecting." She didn't ask if I wanted to see her again. I didn't offer. We split the check. She thanked me for listening. Said it felt good to talk to someone real. I nodded and wished her luck. She hugged me again before we left, longer this time. I walked to my car with a strange mix of emotions. Sadness, irritation, a little guilt. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't manipulative. She was just not ready. Not even close. I got home and checked my phone. One new message from her. I know I talked too much, but I wasn't pretending. "Thank you for holding space." I didn't reply. There wasn't anything wrong with her. But there wasn't room for me in the evening. Not really. I'd just been a warm body in a booth. A stand-in for closure. And maybe that's fine for some people. But I want something mutual. Not a monologue. Not a therapy session. Something that starts with two people, not just the aftermath of one. You'd think after the whole bookstore guy who tried to convert me to a meat-only diet thing, I'd take a break from dating apps. But no. There I was again, swiping through various degrees of facial hair and car selfies, when I matched with Natalie. Her profile was fine. Nothing screamed scam or cult. She had a nice smile, mentioned she liked long walks that don't feel like cardio, and worked in marketing. I figured we'd have at least one decent conversation before the inevitable fade. Surprisingly, she messaged first. "You work in UX, right?" "That's so cool. I'm always curious about how people make apps feel intuitive." I was flattered. I mean, most people see UX and assume I fix printers. We exchanged a few pleasant, mildly flirty messages. She asked thoughtful questions, didn't overuse emojis, and even used semicolons correctly. We made plans for coffee on a Saturday afternoon. She picked the cafe. One of those sleek, Scandinavian-inspired places with cement floors, plant walls, and chairs that look great but punish your spine. She was already there when I arrived, seated at a corner table with 2 drinks. She stood up as I approached, tall, well-dressed, confident. I was quietly relieved. No immediate red flags. "Hi. You must be Aaron," she said, smiling. "I got us cappuccinos." "Thanks," I said. "Very efficient." She laughed. "I am nothing if not optimized." We sat. The conversation started off well. She told me she worked in branding strategy, which sounded vague but harmless. I told her a bit about the app one was working on, which tries to help people track their mood patterns. She seemed genuinely interested. Then, somewhere around minute 27, things shifted. "So," she said, "you work at Tevrin Systems?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "How'd you know that?" "I don't think I mentioned it." She smiled. "Oh, it was in your LinkedIn. I did a little background check. Hope that's not creepy." I laughed cautiously. "I mean, it's only creepy if you found my high school GPA." She leaned in slightly. "I actually know someone who's been dying to get into your company." There it was. I paused. "Oh, yeah, my cousin. She just graduated with a degree in behavioral psych. Super smart, really driven. I actually told her I'd ask around." I blinked. "Ask around like at my job?" "Exactly," she said brightly. I figured, hey, you're in the door already. Maybe you could pass along her resume. I sipped my cappuccino, which suddenly tasted like obligation. "To be honest," I said, "I don't really handle hiring." "Oh, totally," she said. "But even just forwarding it to someone would be amazing. You'd be helping her so much. She's been having a really rough time finding opportunities." I nodded slowly. "Okay. I mean, I can look at it." "Perfect," she said, pulling out her phone. "I'll email it to you right now." She tapped quickly, then looked up. "What's your work email?" I gave her my personal one. She hesitated, then typed it in anyway. We continued chatting, but something had shifted. She stopped asking about me. The warmth dimmed. It was like she'd completed the real objective and was now just waiting for the check. After 40 more minutes of lukewarm banter, mostly her describing her cousin's unpaid internships, we wrapped things up. She stood, gave me a light hug, and said, "This was so great. I'll tell Ava to expect good news." I stood there for a second after she left, still holding the cup, wondering if I'd just been on a date or a referral call. Later that night, I got a LinkedIn request. From Ava S. Mutual connection, Natalie R. The message read, "Hi Aaron. Natalie mentioned you might be able to help me get a foot in the door at Tevrin. Would love to connect." I didn't reply. The next day, Natalie messaged again. "Hey, just checking in. Was Ava able to reach you? She's so excited." Smiley face. I didn't write back right away. I reread our messages. I tried to see if I'd missed something obvious. A hint. A warning. Nope. She'd played it well. Just enough personal sparkle to make me feel like it was a real date. But now that I looked back, every question had been professional. "No, what's your favorite movie?" "No, tell me something weird about you." Just details she could pass on. I waited a day, then replied, "Hey, I'm not comfortable being used as a networking connection under false pretenses. I thought this was a date." No response. 2 days later, her profile vanished. Not unmatched. Gone. Like she'd never existed. A week after that, a new message popped up on LinkedIn. From a different profile. Different name. Same face. Different cousin. His name was Trevor, but he introduced himself as T. He said it like a nickname he'd grown into rather than out of. His messages were polite, a little dry but consistent. He didn't say much, but what he said came with weight, like he edited himself before hitting send. We met at a rooftop bar on a Wednesday evening. The kind of place where the drinks were named after poets, and the city looked like a backdrop instead of a place people lived. He was already there when I arrived, seated near the edge, staring into the skyline like it owed him something. "Lena?" he asked, standing. I nodded. He smiled, small and controlled. "You're exactly on time." I wasn't sure if it was praise or observation. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, and he smelled faintly of something expensive and herbal. We sat. The conversation was fine. Not electric, not dull. He asked about my job, my family, my favorite kinds of silence. I told him I liked when the world quiets right before a storm. He said he liked the hum of streetlights at night. He didn't laugh much. But when he did, it came out quickly like it slipped past his guard. He paid for the drinks. Walked me to my car. At the door, he said, "I'd like to see you again." I said I'd think about it. He tilted his head. You're cautious. I try to be. Good. I watched him walk away, his posture straight, his hands in his pockets. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The next morning, I got a text from an unknown number. You look beautiful against the skyline. That color suits your skin. I stared at the screen. Then another message, seconds later. You laughed less than you wanted to. Why? I didn't respond. I checked the number. No name. No shared history. Not the one Trevor had used. I messaged him anyway. Did you text me from a different number? He replied almost immediately. No. Why? Just got something weird. Probably spam. Block it. People are strange. That night, another message. You used to draw as a kid. You stopped after 3rd grade. Why? I dropped the phone. That wasn't online. It wasn't in any bio. I hadn't told anyone that in years. I blocked the number. Next morning, another message. Different number. Your middle name is Elise. You never liked it. I locked my phone. Turned it off. Took a walk around the block, trying to steady my breath. I'd told Trevor my last name during the date, just casually in a story. Maybe he'd look me up. Maybe this was a sick joke. I called him. He answered on the 2nd ring. Hey, he said. Everything okay? No, I said. I keep getting messages. Someone knows things they shouldn't. A pause. What kind of things? I told him. My drawings. My middle name. Another pause. That's intense, he said. But it's not me. Why would I do that? I don't know. But someone is watching. Or listening. Maybe it's someone from your past, he suggested. An ex? A friend? No, I said. This is different. It feels close. He said he understood. That he'd be upset too. That if I wanted to talk more, he'd be around. I didn't know whether to believe him. I didn't sleep that night. The following afternoon, I went to a cafe downtown to get out of the apartment. I sat near the back, ordered a tea, and tried to read. I glanced up once and froze. Across the room, near the window, sat a woman. She looked like me. Not exactly, but enough to make my stomach turn. Same haircut, same posture, same way of holding a cup with both hands. Sitting across from her, Trevor. He was laughing. Not the small, restrained laugh he'd used with me. This was full. Open. I watched them for a minute. She leaned forward. Touched his wrist. My hands shook. I left the cafe. Fast. That night, another message. You envy the version of yourself that doesn't hesitate. I didn't respond. I called Trevor again. He answered. I saw you, I said. At the cafe. With someone. Silence. Then, you followed me? I was already there. She's someone I know. From work. She looks like me. Another silence. You're upset, he said softly. What is this? I asked. Why are you doing this? I'm not. Then who is? Another pause. Then he said, maybe it's someone who wants to know you better than you know yourself. I hung up. That night, I unplugged everything in my apartment. My laptop. My smart speaker. I covered the cameras on my devices. I took a sleeping pill and went to bed fully clothed. When I woke up, my phone was on, and there was one new photo. Me. Asleep. Taken from the foot of my bed. I screamed. Called the police. They came. Took the phone. Filed a report. Nothing was stolen. No sign of forced entry. They asked if I had any enemies. Any exes. Anyone who might want to scare me. I said no. I didn't mention Trevor. I moved apartments 2 weeks later. No forwarding address. No social media. But the messages didn't stop. They just changed tone. You're learning. That's good. You're harder to follow now. But I still see you. I liked you better when you didn't look over your shoulder. I stopped replying. Stopped reading them eventually. I met him on a Sunday morning. His name was Milo. He was the kind of person who made eye contact like it was a habit, not an effort. His profile was clean, no shirtless photos, no cryptic quotes. Just a casual picture of him in a navy jacket, standing in front of a row of trees, smiling like he knew something you didn't. We chatted briefly. He asked if I liked walking. Not hiking, not jogging, walking. I said yes. He said he knew just the place. We met that afternoon at Walcott Park, a sprawling garden tucked behind a defunct train station. Overgrown paths, a faded carousel, a stone fountain at the center. It was the kind of place where everything felt like it had once been important and had since been forgotten. He brought coffee. Black for him, oat milk for me. We started walking. He was easy to talk to. Not in a performative way. He never overshared, never tried to impress. He just had a calmness that made you want to fill the silence. I told him about my job, how I hated working from home because it made the days blur. He told me he did consulting work, mostly system stuff, he said vaguely. The conversation drifted. We talked about memory and music and the way certain smells could pull you backward in time. I liked the way his mind worked. He asked good questions. He never interrupted. We looped around the park twice. The sun dipped lower. The air grew cooler. Then we passed the fountain. I'd seen it earlier, dry, cracked, with vines curling around its base, but now someone was sitting on the edge. A woman. She wore a pale blue dress, the kind that looked like it belonged to another era. Her hair was long and dark, and she sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap. She didn't look up as we passed. Milo slowed his step. "Do you know her?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "We went out once." I waited for more. "She's persistent," he added, voice low. I looked back. The woman hadn't moved. Her head was tilted slightly downward, like she was listening to something we couldn't hear. "Should we go another way?" I asked. He shook his head. "It's fine. She won't follow." That struck me as an odd thing to say. We kept walking. He picked up the conversation like nothing had happened. I tried to focus, but the image of her stayed with me. How still she was, how pale her hands looked in the shadow of the fountain. When we reached the park's exit, I glanced back. She was gone. He walked me to my car. Said he'd had a great time. Asked if I wanted to meet again. I said yes and meant it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her. Something about the way she sat, like she'd been waiting. Not just for him. For me. The next morning, I received a message. Not from Milo. From an unknown number. "He brings everyone here. Don't let him kiss you." My chest tightened. I replied, "Who is this?" No response. I blocked the number. Later that afternoon, Milo texted. "Still thinking about yesterday. You have a quiet way about you." It was nice. I didn't mention the message. We made plans to meet again. Another walk, another park, this time Hillside Grove. It was smaller. Tighter paths. More trees. We met near a bench tucked under a willow. He brought tea this time. I wore a scarf, even though it wasn't cold. He was just as kind. Just as calm. But something had shifted in me. I was waiting for something to go wrong. Halfway through the walk, I asked casually, "That woman from last time, what was her name?" He looked at me like I'd asked what color the sky was. "I don't remember," he said. I stopped walking. "You said you went out with her." "I did. But you don't remember her name?" He smiled faintly. "Some things don't need names." I didn't know what to say. We finished the walk. He didn't try to kiss me. I was grateful for that. That night, another message. He forgets them on purpose. He saves pieces. I didn't respond. I looked through his profile again, but it was gone. Deleted. Like he'd never been there. I texted him. "Hey, everything okay?" He replied seconds later. "Better now." We met a third time. Back at Walcott Park. I didn't want to go, but I needed to see. We walked in silence this time. He didn't ask questions. Just matched my pace like it had all been rehearsed. When we reached the fountain, she was there again. Same dress. Same posture. But this time, she looked up. Her eyes met mine. And she smiled. It wasn't warm. It was knowing. I stopped walking. Milo kept going a few steps before realizing. "You see her?" I asked. He turned. Looked at the fountain. Looked back at me. "There's no one there," he said. I stared at him. He wasn't lying. He truly didn't see her. I turned back, she was gone. I left the park without saying goodbye. He texted that night. "You left so suddenly. Did I do something wrong?" I didn't reply. I blocked the number. Weeks passed. Then one evening, I was walking home from the train station. A figure stood at the edge of the path. The woman. Same dress. Same stillness. She raised a hand, slowly, and pointed behind me. I turned. Milo. Standing half a block away, watching. I ran. When I got home, there was a message waiting on my voicemail. His voice. "I never said I was the only one who forgets. You will too, eventually. That's how you survive it." I deleted it. But I still see her sometimes. Always at a distance. Always near water. And once, in a mirror. She smiled again. And this time I smiled back. I met Zephyr on the kind of Thursday that feels like it's holding its breath, Gray skies, no wind, the city paused between moods. She arrived 11 minutes late, wearing a dusky blue coat that made her eyes impossible to look away from. She moved like someone who had rehearsed every entrance, but made it look spontaneous. "You're taller than I thought," she said, her voice low and deliberate. "I like tall people. They don't flinch as easily." It wasn't flirtation, it was assessment. I laughed, unsure whether I'd passed or failed. "Good to know." She smiled, just enough to keep me curious, and walked ahead, her boots clicking against the wet sidewalk. We turned into a bar she'd chosen, one of those velvet-lined dens where the lights are low and the wine list is mostly European. She ordered red, chilled slightly. "Room temperature is a myth," she told the bartender. "Most rooms are too warm and full of liars." I had no idea what that meant, but I nodded anyway. Zephyra had a presence that made you recalibrate your own volume. She didn't dominate the room. She bent it. The conversation drifted from books to botany to a childhood obsession with moths. She told me she once spent a summer cataloging the way light affected their wings. "I like things that disappear when you try to hold them," she said, eyes on her glass. "But still come back." At one point, she asked what I'd save in a fire if I could only take one thing that wasn't alive. When I said a box of letters from my grandfather, she tilted her head like she was weighing my soul. "Sentiment," she said. "Useful in moderation." After drinks, we walked. She led us through back streets like she had somewhere specific in mind. As we reached an ivy-covered building on a quiet corner, she paused. "I used to live here," she said, looking up at the third floor. "Well, I still have the key." I waited for the punchline. "You mean, you forgot to return it?" She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No. I mean I still go in sometimes." "You still have a key to your ex's apartment?" She turned to me, her expression unreadable. "It's not like that. He travels a lot. I feed the dog, water the plants. He's fine with it." I stared at her. She stared back. "You think that's strange," she said, not with defensiveness but curiosity. "I think it's blurred." She nodded slowly, like she appreciated the word choice. "I prefer continuity. I don't believe in clean breaks. People don't just stop existing." She kissed me goodnight at the door. Soft, brief, like punctuation. Then she vanished into the building, her key catching the light as it turned in the lock. That night, I lay awake wondering about the thresholds we cross without permission, and the ones we pretend we haven't. The second time she came to my place, she brought a potted plant and a tin of saffron pastries. "I don't like showing up empty-handed," she said. "And I thought your windows looked lonely." We sat on the floor. She curled her legs under her like a cat and asked if I believed in past lives. I said I wasn't sure. She said, "I think I used to be a storm." Halfway through a movie, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then set it face down. "It's him," she said. "The ex." She nodded. "He gets anxious when I don't reply." "You don't owe him anything." She looked at me. "I owe him history. That doesn't vanish just because the rules changed." I didn't argue. I didn't want to push, but a warmth had left the room. Or maybe it was just me, realizing I wasn't alone in this space. Not really. She stayed that night. Fell asleep on my chest like she'd done it before. I listened to her breathing and wondered what else she hadn't given back. A week later, she called me at midnight. "I'm locked out," she said. "Where are you?" "At his place. I came to feed Corvus. But he changed the lock." My blood ran cold. "Zephyra, why were you there?" "I've done it before," she said quickly. "It's not like I was snooping. I didn't think he'd change it." "Did he know you were coming?" Silence. Then, "Does it matter?" I didn't answer. "Can I come over?" I hesitated, long enough for her to notice. "You paused," she said. You think I'm crossing a line. I think you never left the last one." She was quiet. Then, almost pleading, "I just need a place to land tonight." I said yes. Because I still wanted her to choose me. Because some part of me believed she would. She arrived 20 minutes later, hair damp from the snow. She didn't speak. Just took off her coat and curled onto my couch like a ghost that had finally found a body to haunt. She was gone before I woke up. She left a note on my fridge. "Thanks for the silence. It's rare. Z." Days passed. I didn't hear from her. Then a photo popped up on my feed. Zephyra in a park. Corvus beside her. She was smiling, real smile, full teeth. The caption read, "Some connections don't need labels. Or permission." There were 2 coffee cups on the bench behind her. I didn't comment. I didn't call. She messaged me 4 days later. Made soup. Come over. I went. Because I wanted clarity. Because I'd stopped believing I'd get it. Her apartment was small and overgrown with trailing plants and open books. She handed me a bowl of soup and said, "Don't ask what's in it. Just trust me. Do you still have the key?" I asked without warning. She didn't flinch. Yes. Why? She leaned back. Because the door still opens. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. I put the bowl down. Zephyra, I like you. A lot. But I don't want to be the person you text at midnight when the other door doesn't open. She looked at me with something like pity. You think love is a room with one key. I think it's a house with many doors. Then I'm not your house. She stood, walked to her desk, and opened a drawer. Pulled out the key. Silver. Small. Unremarkable. I've thought about throwing it away, she said. But it's not the metal that matters. It's the idea. Then let go of the idea. She smiled sadly. I don't know how. She didn't throw the key away. She just placed it back in the drawer like a bookmark in a story she wasn't done rereading. I left without kissing her. She didn't stop me. I never saw the key again. He introduced himself as Garrett, but said it like a confession. 2 R's, 2 T's. Blame my parents. It's a name that looks symmetrical on paper, which I suppose is the only place I've ever been symmetrical. I laughed. He smiled in that practiced, slow way that made you feel like he saw something in you other people missed. We met at a rooftop bar. He picked it, said it had the best view of the city and the worst cocktails, something about imbalance keeping you honest. He was older than me by maybe 7 years. Wore a charcoal blazer and a black shirt, open at the collar. No tie. His hair was swept back like he'd just come from somewhere expensive. Garrett spoke like a man who'd spent time with therapists but never fully bought in. He listened. Closely. You could feel it. But it was also clear he was measuring, assessing, filing away every answer like data. When I asked what he did, he said, I work in private acquisitions. People give me things they're not ready to sell. I asked if that was supposed to be poetic or literal. He said both. The first 45 minutes were magnetic. He told stories that held tension in the middle, like he'd learned how to pace them perfectly. He asked questions that felt invasive, but in a way that made you want to answer them. Then, in the middle of a second drink, he said it. I dated a married woman for 4 years. He said it like he was telling me he'd spent time abroad. I blinked. You mean like an affair? He nodded. Affair is such a judgmental word. I prefer parallel relationship. I waited for the punchline. There wasn't one. She was married, he said, but not available. That's different. I asked if her husband knew. He smirked. He suspected. But suspicion isn't proof. And proof doesn't always lead to action. I watched him closely. He sipped his drink. I'm not proud of it, he said. But I'm not ashamed either. She was the most honest relationship I've had. I didn't respond. He looked at me. You're judging. I'm processing. He leaned forward. Let me ask you something. If someone makes you feel more alive, more seen, more you, do you owe that experience to a calendar or a contract? I said, you owe it to the people involved. He smiled. That's the polite answer, not the true one. We left the rooftop and walked through the city. He told me about her. Her name was Ilsa, which sounded made up but probably wasn't. She was a photographer. Had a husband who worked in finance and thought loyalty meant paying the mortgage on time. She used to say, Garrett recalled, that living with him was like sleeping next to a wall. No cruelty. Just nothing. I said, that's sad. He nodded. It is. But it's also real. I asked, did she love you? He looked at me with a kind of reverence. She loved the part of herself I gave her permission to be. That didn't answer the question. I asked what happened. She left, he said. Not him. Me. Why? Garrett smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. She said I made her forget she was real. I didn't understand. She meant it as a compliment, he said. But it scared her. He texted me the next day. Dinner tonight? I promise not to talk about married women. Unless you want me to. I didn't reply for 5 hours. Then I said yes. We met at a place with dark booths and menus printed on leather. He ordered for both of us without asking. When I raised an eyebrow, he said, trust is dinner's first ingredient. Over the meal, he asked me about my past, my fears, my earliest memory of rejection. He didn't flinch at any answer. Just nodded, like he'd heard it all before. At one point, I asked, do you ever worry you're just good at sounding sincere? He laughed. I've been accused of that. More than once. Is it true? He leaned in. Does it feel true? It did. And it didn't. By the third date, I was hooked but uneasy. He was brilliant, magnetic, precise. But there was something hollow in him, like a stage set with nothing behind the walls. We went back to his apartment. It was sleek, cold, everything in black, white, or chrome. There were no personal photos, no clutter. I asked, "Did you just move in?" He shook his head. 3 years. Feels unlived in. He looked at me. That's intentional. He poured wine. Told me about another woman briefly. Not Ilsa. Someone else. A woman who had 3 children and a husband she claimed to love. Garrett said they only slept together once. She cried afterward, he said. Said it was the first time she felt like a person in years. I stared at him. You collect people who are taken. No, he said. I find people who are trapped. That's not the same thing? He smiled. It is for them. I asked if he ever pursued women who weren't already entangled. He shrugged. It's less interesting. Less urgent. When someone's already claimed, they have stakes. They know the risk. That makes them honest. That makes them desperate. That too, he said. But desperation is more truthful than politeness. I left early that night. He didn't try to stop me. He just said, when you're ready to be seen, you'll call. I didn't. But I thought about it. More than I'd like to admit. Because Garrett had this way of making morality feel like a costume. Something you could wear or remove depending on the scene. He didn't seduce with touch. He seduced with permission. He made you feel like your darkest thought was actually your most authentic self. And that's the most dangerous kind of intimacy. The kind that doesn't ask you to change. Just to confess. A month later, I saw him at a bookstore. He was with a woman. Young. Wide-eyed. Laughing too loudly. He saw me. Didn't flinch. Just nodded. Like we shared a secret. Maybe we did. Maybe we still do. But I walked away. Because I don't want to be part of someone's collection. Especially not the kind they keep in glass cases, only to take out when the room gets quiet. I almost got attacked over a year ago. I was still dating around before I met my now ex. This skinny, hippie dude pops up. He checks off stoner, artistic, chill, humorous, emotional. My basic standards. Here's where I made a mistake. Instead of planning on meeting publicly, I opted on going to his house. He had roommates and that was good, right? No. We ended up watching Shameless and talking. I did smoke weed, but it didn't leave me unaware of my surroundings. He started talking about his past drug addiction with heroin. Even if he's sober now, it's not for me to have to be worrying about relapse considering my family. But hey, we dug deep. Though at this point, I made my decision to not pursue a thing. Nonetheless, we had a good conversation. But he starts immediately trying to kiss me and push his fingers down my pants. I refused and politely told him that's not what I came for. I reassured him I was just wanting to seek a companion. He seemed to accept that until 5 minutes later when he does it again. I told him no again. I guess the guru over here figured out I'm a rape survivor. I guess he knows who are rape victims and who are not just by them being defensive when he makes a dumbass move. Out of nowhere after, he tells me he was raped too. He said he learned to like it because it was just sex. All it meant was the perpetrator liked you so much that they can't control themselves. I want you to take a wild guess on what he tried to do again. I was able to push his skinny body off of me. It made me feel so strong being able to fight it off this time. I'll give it that. I started slowly walking out trying to distract him by describing my distaste for the Twilight movies. Cheesy, but it saved my ass. I rushed to my car and sped off. I was able to report his account, and I assumed they may have gotten enforcement involved as he never was back on there, and I did mention the attempted rape. It is never your fault if you are put in that situation. You can plan measures to avoid it, but know it is entirely up to a rapist to do that no matter what circumstance. But even as I say this, never ever go to someone's house if you've never met them. Not even if there's weed, not even if they have a cute bunny, not even if they have a clean-ass record. Be safe. A good person will understand these precautions. A bad person will keep coaxing you to do it. Even if you do it and whatever they do is on them, just try to avoid that situation. It's very stressful, risky, and you can be trapped. Don't make the mistake I did. Even if it's not on me, it was not worth the risk. I'm very glad it didn't happen to me again. Obligatory, not a Tinder story, but I feel like people want to read any kind of nightmare story in these uncertain times. Several years ago, I met a girl when I was working at the mall, and we texted for a while. It was going smoothly, so I invited her to a show my band was playing. She agreed to come and see us play, and we were texting pretty consistently right up to the point where she was getting in her car to come to the venue. Then nothing. Complete ghost and no response. I was annoyed, but what can you do? Roughly 6 months later, I get a call and a voicemail from an unknown number. I listen to the voicemail, and it's the girl. "Hey Jacques, it's Crystal. I don't know if you remember me, but I was on my way to see your show, and I stopped to get gas and dropped my phone in a storm drain and lost all my contacts. I finally had the idea to go back through my phone bill because I remembered you were from state I'm from, and found your number. If you're still interested, I'd love to make it up to you. Now, you have to understand this was well before the cloud, so you could easily lose all of your contacts just by losing your phone, and I don't remember the exact details of her story, but I'm not sure if she had the transcriptions of the numbers she texted, or if it was from the first time I called her phone to make sure the number she gave me was correct. In any case, TI sounded legit, and I figured I'd at least get an apology so I agreed to meet up with her that weekend. I offer to meet her somewhere, but she insists on picking me up, saying that she owes me big time for meeting me, and that she's so sorry she did that to me. We go out for lunch at a sushi place and have a fine time. She's a little frenetic, but she's obviously nervous and very apologetic. When she insists on paying, I knew she had been thinking about this for months. Afterwards, we go to Starbucks for coffee. She insists on paying there too. She says she needs to stop at Nordstrom, and would I like to come? Sure, I say. Why not? She says she'll buy me anything I want. What? We get to Nordstrom, and she picks up her makeup, and we walk around. We have a little decent banter, but she's constantly offering to buy me things, and since I'm declining, it's getting a bit annoying. This is a nice sweater. I'll get it for you. Or haha, look at those shoes. Why? Do you want them? I'll get them for you. It was a bit forced, so I suggest we skip out, and now she wants to take me out for dinner. It's been long enough that I'm okay with it, and she insists on paying there too. Since it's obvious to me she's made her apology, I make an honest effort to pay, and she almost rudely refuses by pushing my card away. At this point, I'm bored with her, and this whole paying for things scheme has run its course. I'm happy to just go home afterwards, so we finish up and she drives me home. On the way back, I'm wondering if I should just follow through. She's cute and obviously interested, and has certainly paid her dues, so to speak. Before I have a chance to decide, she's parked the car and says, "Do you mind if I come up and use your bathroom?" Very clever. The decision has been made for me. She comes up and goes straight to the bathroom. She's in there long enough that I can tell she's nervous. I clean up the place a bit, put on some music, light a candle, etc., and I stand at the end of the hall waiting for her. I have my sexy pose and look ready to go so that she'll see me, and that I mean business, right as she exits the bathroom. The door opens and she sees me and knows it's on. I can see the look change from uncertainty as her eyes meet mine. She walks right up to me, and I immediately get a huge, stinky whiff of poop air from my bathroom. She wasn't in there staring at herself in the mirror to muster up the courage to make the move, nor was she in there unable to resist touching herself at the very thought of our bodies unclothed and pressed against each other in mere moments. She was in there taking a ferociously giant shit, and now the air from around it was in my mouth and nose. I gagged and immediately backed away and told her that it was super nice of her to take me out, and that I really appreciated it, and what a funny story, and can't wait to tell people, and I have to go to sleep right away, so bye-bye, see you later, drive safe. I had to kind of push her out the door before running back into the rest of my apartment to open all the windows and light a second, third, and fourth candle, reserved for really sexy nights. I don't remember if we texted much after that, but that smell was forever associated in my mind with her, and all possible sexiness was removed from the situation. I call it Pavlov's log. I've always been wary of meeting strangers, so steering clear of dating apps was an easy decision at first. I didn't want to date anyone online because I didn't like meeting with strangers. It wasn't because of a past experience, but because of what I hear on the news. People trick others into meeting them through dating apps, and then they empty their bank accounts, or the victim gets reported missing. No thanks, I'd say, shaking my head as they became the go-to way to meet people. Not for me. I wasn't about to end up as a true crime headline. I was feeling lonely and wasn't a social person who could talk to strangers and become friends with them. I felt a lack of confidence in front of girls that I find attractive. Once, I ended up asking a girl about her favorite color, She just laughed at me and told her friends. But as months passed, I watched my friends go on date after a date. Some even found long-term relationships this way. And to be fair, most of the guys they met seemed normal. Sure, there were a few weirdos with their unsolicited messages, but nothing truly terrifying. Still, I held my ground, avoiding dating apps like the plague. Until I got super lonely. Everything around me started feeling quiet, and I was getting into a depressing state. I really need to find someone with whom I can spend time, laugh, and maybe I'll be lucky enough to find a life partner. I might get lucky. Yeah, I know. Hypocritical. But after graduating and settling into my career, meeting people became hard. Gone were the days of bumping into someone at a party every weekend, which was also rare because my social battery used to charge rarely. Work drained me, and the idea of forcing myself to go out just to meet new people. Exhausting. I started to think I'd be alone forever. I was accepting my life. I wished that I was like my friends who had a balance of work and enjoyment, but all I had was work and depression. So reluctantly I gave in. Downloaded one app. Then another. Then a few more. Swiping became second nature, an oddly addictive way to pass the time. But even as I scrolled through an endless sea of faces, I rarely reached out. Talking to strangers still made me uneasy, and let's be real. I've listened to way too many true crime podcasts. The constant warnings to never let your guard down weren't easy to ignore. Looking back now, that paranoia might have saved my life. I wasn't reckless. I refused to meet anyone until I felt like I knew them. So when someone familiar popped up on my screen, I was intrigued. I actually knew this guy. Went to high school with him. If I was ever going to give this a shot, meeting someone I already had a history with seemed like the safest option. I swiped right, then set my phone down to brush my teeth. Seconds later, my screen lit up. We matched. My first reaction? Shock. We weren't exactly friends back then. I doubted he even knew I existed. He was part of that elite, ultra-rich crowd at my private high school, a place I only managed to attend thanks to a partial scholarship and my parents' relentless hard work. Alan, as we'll call him, wasn't the worst of the rich kids, but he fit the stereotype: effortless grades, expensive cars, and a new girlfriend every month. He got away with anything and everything. When his message came through, I almost ignored it. But then I thought, maybe I was being unfair. High school was years ago. People change. And okay, I'd be lying if I said I hadn't secretly crushed on him back then. I answered. We messaged for hours, laughing and reminiscing. He was funny, charming, and by the time I finally forced myself to sleep, it was nearly 3 a.m. Before we'd signed off, he asked if I wanted to meet up the next evening. No pressure, of course. Only if you're comfortable. Was I comfortable? Not really. But I still typed back, sure. Smiley face. The next day, I distracted myself with random chores until the afternoon. Then I went all in: long bath, face mask, makeup, the works. I hadn't been on a date in ages, but the routine felt familiar. Dressed in a black mini dress and heels, I stepped out the door, heart racing with anticipation. We met at a small gastropub, catching up over dinner and drinks. He'd gone to college, then started working at his family's company. He seemed more mature now, but like me, he admitted he'd been feeling lonely. When the check came, he paid despite my attempt to split it. And then at the end of the night, he asked, "Want to come back to my place?" No pressure. Only if you're comfortable. Normally, I'd say no. Not because of some outdated rule about what's proper, but because trust takes time. But I knew him. At least I thought I did. We stopped at a liquor store, and Alan let me pick out a 6-pack of ciders. When the cab arrived, he held the door open for me, then rushed to do the same when we pulled up to his place. It was a nice house, no surprise there. Inside, he handed me an open cider, and we settled onto the couch, talking and sipping our drinks. An hour later, 6 empty bottles lined the coffee table, and we made our way to his bedroom. We had sex. It was good, not amazing, but let's be honest. Is it ever amazing the first time with someone new? Afterward, I started slipping on my heels, ready to head home, but he stopped me. "Stay the night," he said. "Let's just talk for a while." I wasn't expecting that, but it was nice. I agreed. That's when things got weird. He got up and came back with mixed drinks. I was thirsty, so I finished mine pretty quickly. Immediately, he jumped up to get me a refill. I hesitated. He wasn't even halfway through his first drink, but I told myself I was overthinking. It wasn't like he needed to get me drunk. We'd already slept together. Still, I drank the second, one more slowly. And when he left to use the bathroom, I tossed the rest out the window. Alan came back with yet another refill. He He was still nursing his first drink, and set mine on the table. Then, out of nowhere, he started tickling me. Normally, I'd be annoyed, but he was cute, so I played along. We wrestled a bit, laughing, and for a moment, it felt like we were about to go for round 2. Then he pinned me down. His expression shifted, too serious, too intense. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. But his hands pressed me into the mattress a little too hard. Then, just as quickly, he let go. Smiled. Joked. The easygoing guy I'd been talking to was back. I told myself not to overreact. Maybe I'd misread the moment. We kept talking, laughing. I was just starting to shake off the uneasy feeling when it happened again. Alan suddenly went quiet, staring off at nothing, like he was listening for something I couldn't hear. I lost my train of thought. Then he slapped himself. Not hard, but enough to make me freeze. "Knock it off," he muttered under his breath. That old paranoia of mine flared back to life. I sat up. Alan noticed and quickly grinned, shaking his head like I was being silly. "It's okay, love. Come here. Come back to bed." Hesitantly I did. His arms wrapped around me, and against my better judgment, I let myself relax. It felt good to be close to someone again. I was drifting off when he did it again. This time he knocked his head against the headboard, harder than before. "Quit it, seriously," he muttered, voice tense. Something was wrong. My heart pounded as I tried to decide what to do. Finally I eased my feet onto the floor, kissed his forehead, and told him I needed the restroom. I padded down the hallway to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I needed a second to think, to figure out my next move. I wanted to believe I was overreacting. Alan had been sweet all night. Maybe he was just dealing with something internal, something personal. That didn't make him dangerous. But that didn't mean I was safe either. I splashed cold water on my face, willing myself to calm down. Then, bang! Something slammed against the wall. "If you don't cut it out, I'm going to have to call the police." A struggle. Shuffling. But Alan was the only one in the room. And I didn't want to be in that house anymore. I slipped out of the bathroom, moving quickly and silently on tiptoes toward the living room. Holding my breath, I cracked the front door open, then bolted. Barefoot, I exploded into the night, my abandoned heels the last thing on my mind. Behind me, the front room lights flicked on. Alan burst through the doorway, his voice raw with fury. "Where are you?" he bellowed, his footsteps pounding against the driveway. "Where are you, bitch?" I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I lay hidden beneath his neighbor's car, paralyzed with fear. For minutes that felt like forever, he searched. Stalking up and down the driveway, scanning the street. But he never found me. Once I was sure he'd given up, I ran. Down the street, as fast as my legs would carry me. I called a cab and never looked back. The next day, Alan tried to reach me. The sweet, funny guy I'd met on the app reappeared in my messages, acting as if nothing had happened. But I knew the truth. I'd heard it in his voice as he screamed into the night, raw, vicious, and unfiltered. That was the real Alan. And I could never feel safe around him again. At first I felt lucky. Over drinks with my friends, I laughed it off, told them I'd dodged a bullet, lost a good pair of heels, but saved myself a hell of a lot of trouble. Alan was unhinged, I told them. Just another rich asshole who'd never faced consequences. Years passed. I barely thought about that night, until one of Alan's high school friends, his best friend, went on trial for murder. He'd taken a date home. The prosecution claimed he threw her off the roof of his parents' mansion. He insisted she was crazy. Drunk, hysterical, erratic. She'd jumped on her own. He'd tried to stop her. He'd tried to help. But she was too aggressive. Too dangerous. To prove it, he handed over an audio recording from that night. "You never know what you might get accused of these days," he'd said. "Best to cover your bases, right?" He was acquitted. No charges. No consequences. Same as always. I listened to that recording, over and over again. And I heard it, the soft, unmistakable sounds of blows landing. The way his voice stayed just a little too calm as he told her to knock it off, cut it out. And then right before she jumped, "If you don't stop, I'll have to call the police. I know what really happened. I know he killed her. I just can't prove it. And I know without a doubt that I wasn't just lucky that night with Alan. I didn't just dodge a bullet. I escaped my own murder. Allegedly, of course. Alan hadn't been hearing voices. He wasn't battling intrusive thoughts. He wasn't talking to himself at all. He was recording me. And if I hadn't run, I wouldn't have left that house alive.